Goeiedag. Good day, fellow South Africans. Yep, we have something new. You know, one of the big things that I do every day is spend hours researching subjects related to what's happening in South Africa. And, you know, I'm going to be showing you a video in a very short while about this fellow, Denis D'Souza, who's an Indian guy, who's giving a talk to a college in the United States of America. Now, just like in South Africa, the colleges in the USA have become horribly radicalized. And during the video that's playing, you'll hear protesters outside the meeting room where he's talking, screaming and shouting, trying to shut him down. But before I go into any further information on that, let me just tell you that I want to say thank you so much for all those people who've offered to provide buckies or trucks to help Patrick and, you know, get that maize out to the impoverished white people in the Gauteng region. It's really appreciated. Vanessa and I have had a huge response, and that's great. And if you do have a bucky, please contact Vanessa. I will put her email down below. We need as many buckies as we can to get to every single squatter camp in Gauteng and give them hope. Okay, guys, so look, that's happening this weekend. We're sorting out Patrick, getting him up to Johannesburg. No, okay. Let me get back to the story here. Denis D'Souza, an Indian fellow. He's married to a woman from South America, and he went to a college called Dartmouth College, which is in New Hampshire in the USA. And like universities in South Africa, they've become very, very politicized. And, you know, the Democrats, the loony left, are currently running the situation there with their academia and so on. You know, this political correctness we talk about. And there are a few points that I want you to listen carefully to in Denis's talk that he gives. And this is under, you know, where people are questioning him. And these are normally loony lefties. And he says, the important role of the settlers. And if you listen carefully, at times when someone in the audience is asking you a question, you'll hear the crowd outside. It's only when he's responding you don't hear the crowd outside. That's the noise they're making through coming into the room. And getting back to the important role of the settlers, or the colonizers, Denis says, the colonizers create the country that immigrants want to come to. Now you can see the overlap between South Africa and the USA here. I'm talking about pre-1994. I mean, nobody wants to come to South Africa now. So the colonizers, the much reviled white people in South Africa, created the country that immigrants want to come to. Why do you think there's a huge flood of black Africans pouring into South Africa right now? Because their countries are cactus. And it was not a white government that made their countries cactus. But guess what? And a black post-1994 government is doing to South Africa? It's making it cactus. It's not even, you know, there's no way you can dispute that fact. It's a fact. And there's a huge comparison in what he says between early South Africa and the United States of America and what's going on. I mean, it is huge. And he makes this comment which I find very, very interesting and pivotal to this entire discussion that he has. And he's talking about the Democrats, but here in America, Democrats in America, but here in South Africa we're talking about the ANC and the EFF. And he says, and you'll hear this for yourself, the tragedy is the abject sense of hopelessness and dependency of the people, exploited by a political party. The people who run this oppression want it to stay that way because they can keep on being dependent on them. Anyway, look, I'm going to let you listen to this video. I spent hours going through videos on YouTube and researching and shit like that. But this particular video, and I have actually reached out to Denisa and I said, look, I'd love to have a chat to you on my live stream. So we'll see what he comes back with. He's a very outgoing guy. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. And here comes the extract from his speech. And I'll put his whole speech down below so you can go and have a listen to the whole thing. But he nails it. He really nails it. And the overlaps between South Africa, what's happening in South Africa right now, and the USA are extraordinary. You know, you can just see there's like it's the same train running alongside each other. You know, it's just crazy. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye for now.
They brought with them courage, ambition, and the values of family, neighborhood, work, peace, and freedom. And then he goes on to talk about how immigrants are making this country great, and then he says make America great again. I'm wondering what your own former boss would say about you now.
So the question is, quoting Reagan, my hero, and a lot of the reason I became a conservative, about how immigrants are entrepreneurial, hardworking, pro-family, and the question, and I just want to excavate the buried assumption of the question: how disappointed your former boss would be in you now. Now, I would submit that nobody would ask a question like that who actually was listening to what I said tonight. I actually believe that immigrants are hardworking, industrious, entrepreneurial. I said I would like to see the number of legal immigrants in this country increased. I would like to see our immigration policy modified to take far more of those kinds of immigrants. My position on immigration is thoroughly and completely Reaganite. Now, what gets me is when I hear things that revolt against what I know and also against common sense. And so there are things that people will sometimes say, like, immigrants created this country and built this country. True, but only partially true, because that distinction confuses actually two groups that are not the same: immigrants and settlers. Settlers. Colonizers, if you will. Colonizers. Okay, let's call them colonizers. Colonizers. Here's the important thing. Colonizers create... Genocide. Why are you shouting? Don't... Hold on. It's not. We can have a whole debate on that. But let me address your point. Colonizers create the country that immigrants want to come to. Think of that paradox right there. In other words, if the colonizers were such horrible guys and have done such a botched up job of creating this country, why on earth today do immigrants from all over the world still want to come here? Why do we even have to talk about a wall in the knowledge that if we didn't have a wall, half the world would come here? What was it about those colonizers, despite their colonization, that was so powerful that 150 years later, the country that they made is still the magnet for the world? So immigrants like me will jump over fences, stand in lines, pay a lot of money, abandon our families to come to the country the colonizers made. Now, all right, let's make this the last question in fairness, and I will have extended the time. Go for it. The mic is yours.
If that's the case, that the colonizers have created this wonderful country for people,
Why is it that the very descendants of the people that lived here before colonizers came in are the ones that are almost the most marginalized in this country and systematically suffering because of that?
Yes, I'll try to answer that as best I can. The condition of the American Indians, historically, we have to look at it twofold, historically and today. Historically, it was the Indian Wars, the broken treaties by the white man, the wounded knee, the battles, the massacres. It was also a plethora of diseases that spread through the Indian population brought by the white man, and that decimated the American Indian population.
It was also, intentionally introduced, right?
No, that's not true. There's a debate about Jeffrey Amherst, and there's a controversial episode there. But look, diseases, there's a book I recommend to you by the historian William McNeill. It's called Plagues and Peoples. It talks about how massive populations have been decimated historically by diseases brought by outsiders. For example, the Black Plague in Europe killed 1/3 of the entire continent, brought from Asia, unintentionally. Now, I'm not going to say that's genocide, because genocide implies a deliberate intention to exterminate an entire population. That's why the use of the term genocide is very irresponsible on your part in this case. You don't think so? You think, and I'm going to ask you now for your evidence, that there was a conscious intention to wipe out the Indians as a people. Chapter and verse. Let's hear it.
So, what do you say about the very thing that this institution was initially founded on, about essentially whitewashing the Native Americans? And then that was, of course, abandoned, but all of these things. But what do you say about the foundational thing for Indian schools that were created, and then there were things about headhunting Indians and prizes for that money? It was a clear incentivization by both the U.S. government and just by people to be able to take over the property, the land, the things that people had here before the colonizers came.
So Eliezer Wheelock leaves Yale and comes up here into the woods of New Hampshire to set up a college to Christianize and educate the native Indians. Are you saying that he wanted to exterminate them?
I think that's a questionable, it's based in something else. So it has to do with, understanding culture and whether or not you can actually, help someone by Christianizing them.
Right, but pause for a moment, because see, part of education is making distinctions, right? Let's say I believe as a Christian that your life would be infinitely better than it is if you became a Christian. And in that sincere belief, I read the Bible to you and I start proselytizing you. I'm not Adolf Hitler. You may not go for it. You may think that I'm conning you, but you can't deny that my motivation is actually to save your immortal soul. And what I'm getting at is that for you then to say, this is genocide, and not be able to even back off from that, even though we're looking at a very specific case where there's no evidence to support your position, but you're so dug in ideologically that it would twist your mind to admit, look, it's a long distance from Eliezer Wheelock to Hitler. And yes, and trying to convert somebody, even if it's ultimately going to mean changing their culture, even if you think that that's a bad idea, it doesn't mean that they thought that, and it doesn't make them into the evil caricature that you're trying to make out. Now,
also understand the multiple harmful effects of doing something.
I think we should do that. And I think that the most harmful effect today, if you look at the Indian reservation, and I've actually spent time on the Indian reservation. When I lived in Arizona, I got when I lived in Arizona, I got an up-close look at American Indian reservations for a whole year. And here's what I want to say. The tragedy of the American Indian today is the abject sense of hopelessness and dependency. And you cannot deny that that dependency is cunningly exploited by a political party that harvests 90% of its vote. So, on the Indian reservation, there's a book you should read that talks about the Indian reservation. It's just called The Res. And the guy starts off by saying, on the Indian reservation, he goes, there's no Starbucks. There's no 7-Eleven. There are not even any billboards. There are no ads for medical doctors. In other words, it's a place defined by desolation. And he goes, and interestingly, the people who run it want it that way. And that's the point I want to stress. It is that we are dealing with a new kind of oppression, very different than the kind, you're fighting the oppression, if you will, of the 1600s. You're still mad about Columbus, right? And what you aren't doing is actually going on a reservation and seeing what it is about those people's lives. You know, things like we could use some elementary sanitation on the reservation. And it would be really nice if people weren't being shot at night without any cops showing up. And it would be really nice if there were some jobs actually available and companies that would have incentives to come here. And why isn't any of that happening? And who's blocking it and why?
Those are good questions. Do you also think that it is not useful and important and pertinent to focus on Columbus and the legacy that that's left?
Yes, it is. But it's, alas, going to be a topic for another day. I want to thank you all for coming. It's really been fun. Thank you very much. Thank you.